David Cameron's taken rather a strong stance against this. Is that something you'd agree with?
Well, you know, taking strong stances and fighting battles is one thing. Winning is quite another. It's perfectly clear that Mr Cameron thought he could put together a coalition of countries to form a blocking minority under the Brussels rules to stop this man getting the job. His judgment has been woeful. He's picked completely the wrong battle. He's about to be humiliated. You know, even if he had succeeded in getting rid of Juncker, it wouldn't have mattered, because we'd have got somebody else with a similar federalist vision, because they're the only real runners and riders for this job. What he should have done is to pick a fight on policy, and I'm afraid he hasn't done that. I'll be fascinated to hear what the Prime Minister has to say at the end of today, but frankly, it is game, set and match to Brussels. Well,
he's sending a rather strong signal, though, isn't he? He's sort of saying that, you know, I won't compromise, I won't back down. When we say no, we mean no. That's a good thing, surely, for a British Prime Minister to do at this stage.
Well, the Prime Minister is sending a very strong signal that his policy of renegotiation now is not worth a row of beans, because he's shown that when he digs in and fights hard, he loses and gets almost no sympathy from anybody. And I think for most of the British public at the end of the day, you know, that segment of the population who would be prepared to vote yes to stay inside a European Union if we got back significant powers, they're going to look at this and say, what chance is there? Britain is completely and utterly isolated. Why on earth prolong the agony? Why even attempt to go through a 2.5-year negotiating period? Why don't we have a referendum to sort out Britain's future and do it before the general election?
But don't you think that section of the public will also think, actually, here's a British Prime Minister who said one thing to us and he said the same thing in Europe and he's stuck with it instead of going to Europe and then making little deals behind the scenes? I mean, his profile here will be served well, won't it?
Well, they might. People may well say that, like the England football team, they tried their best in Brazil, but they came back as losers to very little acclaim. And I'm afraid it's a very similar situation. We've had prime ministers before, you know, and one thinks of Margaret Thatcher, even John Major at Maastricht. You know, we had prime ministers before who went to the Council of Europe with a strong negotiating position and came back with something they could hold up before the British public and say, look, I won this concession. Mr Cameron has dug himself deeper and deeper into this pit of fighting against Jean-Claude Juncker and frankly, left himself humiliated, vastly outnumbered. Britain's influence in Brussels is weaker today than it has been at any point in the last 40 years.
Let's assume that Mr Juncker is appointed later this afternoon. Will that make any difference at all? Will it have any impact on Britain's relationship with the European Union?
Directly, none. No, of course not, because Mr Juncker is just like Mr Barroso before him. It makes no difference. We are members of a union that are pushing at full speed towards building a United States of Europe. A lot of British politicians don't want to hear that, but I spend much of my life in the European Parliament listening to that being said. And that is why, you know, a combination of full political union, open borders, unlimited immigration, not to mention a £55 million a day membership fee of this club. That is why the people of this country deserve to have a proper say on this subject. Many would have been pleased that Mr Cameron said he now believed in a referendum, having not done so a couple of years ago. But now the idea that we can kick this, you know, a couple of years beyond the next general election doesn't bear credibility. Britain has lost its negotiating hand and it's done it on the wrong battle.
David Cameron, do you seriously think he's going to come back with nothing? I mean, he's going to be in negotiations all afternoon before this announcement is made, if indeed they do decide to go, as we all think that they will with Mr Juncker. I mean, he might get a decent seat on the Commission or something like that, mightn't he?
Well, you know, he comes back having said he would fight to the last man over the appointment of Jean-Claude Juncker. He comes back with his own negotiating hand in Brussels clearly substantially weakened, and he comes back to a British public who see him as a loser in Europe. So I don't think there's very much he's going to celebrate about today.
Nigel Farage, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, on the Commission President, from the outset, I've been clear where I stand on this issue. I firmly believe in the principle that the European Council should be the one to propose the candidate. And if you believe in a principle, you should stand up for it. That is why I stood firm in my opposition today. I believe that by working together, we could have found an alternative candidate who commanded the support of every member state, agreeing together on the best way forward. And I think it's a serious mistake that other leaders decided to abandon that approach today. And it's why I insisted that the European Council took a vote. If the European Council, the elected heads of government, are going to allow the European Parliament to choose the next President of the European Commission in this way, I wanted it on the record that Britain opposed that. The Council voted to nominate Jean-Claude Juncker as the next President of the European Commission. Britain and Hungary opposed. We must accept the result, and Britain will now work with the Commission President, always do, to secure our national interest. But let me be absolutely clear. This is a bad day for Europe. It risks undermining the position of national governments, it risks undermining the power of national parliaments, and it hands new power to the European Parliament.